You dream of a career with better pay, benefits, and hours, but you're not sure about going back to school full-time. At Miller Mock College, we can help. We offer programs that are affordable and flexible to fit into your busy life. Most can be completed in less than 2 years. See what Miller Mock College can offer. Visit our campus at 6397 Lee Highway, Suite 100 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or learn more online at miller-motte.edu.
Asante came to TurboTax after graduating from culinary school and landing a job in the hottest kitchen in town.
My hands are full all day, every day. I love it.
Asante, as your TurboTax expert, I'll make your moves count, guaranteeing 100% accurate filing and your maximum refund. Sound good?
Yes, expert!
Switch to Intuit TurboTax and make your moves count. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Experts only available with TurboTax Live.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to our podcast. This is iCompete, Building Your Empire with John Hewitt, live from the castle. Hi, I'm Roberta Barrett. I'm John Hewitt's producer. You might be asking, who is John Hewitt? Well, he is the Hewitt in Jackson Hewitt Tax Services. If you want to find out more about John Hewitt and what he's currently doing, go to loyaltybrands.com. That's loyaltybrands.com, or find John T. Hewitt on LinkedIn or Facebook. John Hewitt's made over 1,000 millionaires, and you could be the next one. Here is your host, John Hewitt.
Thank you, Roberta, and welcome. Today's guest, I have one of my favorite franchisees that I've ever had out of my 5,000 franchisees, and we're gonna go through Scott Curtis. Welcome.
Well, thank you, John. It's great to be here, and those are pretty high praise words coming from you. I appreciate that. But you need to also include my wife, Christy, in that.
Absolutely, your better half.
That's right, no doubt.
A great lady. So I'm going to let's start by going through your career and your with Liberty, because when was the first time that you met me and came into Virginia Beach to investigate becoming a franchisee with us? You
bet. So you still know and work with John Taylor. John Taylor was a dear friend of mine before he had met you. And John Taylor invited me to a non-compete ending party that you had in Virginia Beach on, I think it was April 30th. I know it was in 1999. It was right after the tax season. So your 3-year non-compete with Jackson Hewitt had just ended, and you threw a party as the launch of being able to sell franchises to the entire United States with Liberty. So I went to that. I came up from Charlotte. I live in Charlotte, and came there, and it was a beautiful party. It was in a museum, I believe, and they had some kind of a glass art show. And an interesting fact, I don't know if you remember this, John, but there's a lot of people there, and you and I got in a corridor so we could speak privately. And the first question I asked you was, are you a Christian? And you kind of looked, wow, I don't get that question very often. And you looked at me very sincerely and frankly and said, yes, I am. And I was impressed by that. I liked that answer. That was how I met you.
Well, let me ask you this, Scott, because in my whole life, I've only been asked that question by someone I just met less than 5 times. So how many times have you asked that question?
Not that many. It's a bold question, and you almost have to trust the guy that you're asking it to won't be offended by it. Because some people will get offended by it. And just in talking to John Taylor, that's why I felt comfortable doing that. And I wanted to know because, I was up there to discover whether I wanted to get involved with you or not. And one of my most important aspects of getting involved with someone is, do they have a Christian worldview? So I don't ask that very often, but I'd say I've asked it probably 20 times in my life.
Wow. So I still, even 20 years later, 22 years later, I haven't been asked that question twice in the last 22 years. So if I seem taken aback, I was taken aback. I thought that was was very forward, and so but I try to be always truthful. So let's, getting off that, let's talk about your life. Where'd you go to college?
Went to the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina.
Did you play
I started there in 1973. So a long time ago.
Did you play any sports?
I did. I played football. I was successful in high school and was just blessed to have a college scholarship there at the University of South Carolina. And so I went on a football scholarship there.
I know that.
Wonderful experience.
I know that must have been long. Lou Holtz was there at one point. Did you ever meet Lou Holtz?
Well, I met him, interestingly enough, at North Carolina State, because he was a coach at North Carolina State then in 1973, and they recruited me as well. And I turned down his scholarship offer to take what then was Paul Diesel's scholarship offer at South Carolina.
Awesome.
So I did meet Lou Holtz. He was, in the 80s, which I was long gone when he came to South Carolina.
Yeah. He's one of the greatest coaches ever, and I love and one of the greatest speakers, if not the greatest football speaker ever. But I love the one joke that he told. I one Sunday afternoon, I just watched 3 hours of his speeches, and he told the same joke each and every time when he made his speech. He said, I have 4 children. They're all girls except for the 2 boys. So that was that's the kind of jokes he told. He was funny but interesting and always made great points. So what'd you do after college?
So stayed in Columbia, worked at a pretty low-level job for a year. Then I went up to Charlotte. So I grew up in Mooresville, North Carolina, and Charlotte was the big city near Mooresville. And so I got a job with a construction company, subcontractor there, and it was a great job. Some really good people, and they taught me the principles of selling. And then eventually I bought a subcontracting company that did overhead doors in 1988. And that was my first shot at being an entrepreneur. And boy, was I in over my head with that. I think I worked harder than ever, but I never made any money doing that. And then after that, I went to my brother, and he ran it for a few years, and then we sold it to a bigger company. But I went to work for a manufacturer in that industry as a regional rep, and that was enjoyable as well. But I've always had that entrepreneur spirit with me, and I guess once you do that, it's hard to go back to working for someone in a big organization. But through that business, through being a manufacturer's rep, I met John Taylor, and then John Taylor and I became friends. We had a lot of the same principles and worldviews and such, and then he actually got fired from the company he was working for that I was working with him for. And then about a year later, we connected again, and he had met you at church, I believe, and you had hired him to be in your franchise development department. And then the next thing came along, and I remember, John, I can remember back then, he gave me this cheesy portfolio that I think he got it from Walmart, little clear plastic things where he put a few black and white copies of bullet points about you and Liberty Tax Service, and that was his sales pitch, but it worked. I'm telling you, it came up, and then I ended up in Virginia Beach that April 30th, and I remember the second question I might have asked you then was, how many territories should I buy? And you looked at me, and I've heard you say this 30, 40 times since that day, but you said, how much money do you want to make? And I told you, and you said, well, you should buy 4 territories then. And I'm like, wow, I'm not sure I can do that. I've only got $14,000 in a savings account, and that's all the capital I have. And you made it possible. You took away every excuse that I could possibly have, and it got down to whether I wanted to do this or not. And you took away all the excuses, and of course we did it, and it worked out pretty well for us.
So did self-employment run in your family? I mean, you felt called to be self-employed. Were your parents self-employed?
Well, my grandfather was. My grandfather on my mother's side and I were very close, and he was an entrepreneur, and his business started out being if you remember the old concept of a 5 and dime store, I'm sure you do.
Well,
And,
I'm the oldest person in virtually every room, so yeah, I remember lots of five and dimes. Most of our listeners won't, though. Most of our listeners won't. Do you remember any of the names that started with five and dimes?
well, his was called Delt's Five and Dime, but he worked for a season for a year or so for Eagles, which was the biggest back then in the early '60s and such. And so he did that, and my daddy, worked for him. So then there became a pattern that my grandfather would open up a business and my dad would run it for him. And he did that with the Five and Dime. He did that with a barbecue restaurant, and he did that with a few other little ventures. And so that's what my dad did. So in a respect, yeah, it runs in my family, that entrepreneur spirit. Sure.
Okay, so we ended with before you were saying that did you acquire 4 territories?
I did.
Okay.
And,
okay.
Yep,
And let's talk about when you first opened and how successful back then. That was the first year you opened in the first year of my non-compete. Do you remember how many offices that we had?
I think it was just over 100.
Exactly. And you were one of the, so how did you do compared to other franchisees in the system your first year?
I didn't even know that this was a big deal, but we did 770 some odd returns that year. And good gracious, in today's standard, that would be like world breaking result. But even then, it was in the top 10, I think, of those 100, and maybe even higher than that. I don't remember, but it was pretty good. And we were in a little mall in a 480 square foot space within a mall, and it was just the perfect storm. It worked. Everything worked really well.
You were. I think you were 4th best new office in the country. And how much tax experience had you had?
Well, you know that I had 0 and maybe less than 0. I was frustrated doing my own taxes. I couldn't do that very well, and didn't like that every year. But I was too cheap to pay somebody to do it, so I would do it. And finally, and what you had always taught us is that you don't do taxes. You're the CEO of the business. You're not the tax practitioner. You need to understand it, and we did. And Christy became a really good tax preparer, and that helped us a lot. But truth is, I never did learn how to do taxes that well.
Did she? When did she start working with you in the business?
Well, immediately. I kept my full-time job as a manufacturer's rep, and we had young children at that time. She would open up the store in the morning, and I would work my job. I was home based and work my job until about 4 o'clock, and I would come down. She would go pick up the kids. I would close up the store, and that was a typical day during tax season there. And the way we trained ourselves was to do taxes was we hired a guy that had just retired from Jackson Hewitt to teach a rapid class, a 1-week tax class. And he did, and he taught that, and we took the class. And it was a great deal because we also got to see the students very intimately and got to choose who we hired for that season. So that worked out pretty well. So
you had an incredible start, and you were off to the races, and then you got your first of bad news. And what was the bad news?
So we were in this mall, and it was called Midtown Square Mall in Charlotte. And it was one of the oldest malls in North Carolina, but it was the perfect location. And if you remember that summer, after the first summer, I came up to Virginia Beach, and you did a scatter map of our customers. And you said, I've never seen anything like this, because it came from all over Charlotte. And what the deal was is it was on a bus route, and people would come to that mall from all over Charlotte, and they would get their taxes done at the Liberty Tax Store there. So it was a great mall. It wasn't a big, giant mall like they are now. It was a small little community mall. And after about halfway through the season of the second season in that mall, we got a letter from the landlord saying that the leases will not be renewed, and you have to get out, next year. You'll be able to go through tax season the third year, but then you got to get out. And by then we were doing, a little bit over 1,000 returns and really cash flowing nicely. but we had to find a new location. So that was a bit disappointing to your point.
So I don't know if you recall, but I came down to see the mall and help you find a location, look for a location. And that's when I looked at the scatter map and said, and you understated it when you said it was at the center of a bus route. It was the center at all the buses, right?
Okay. Yes,
right,
sir.
Right. There were dozens of routes that ended right there. There was whether it's a terminal or an area, all the buses from all over the city came into your right next to your mall. And so your customers were from all over the place, and you were going to have to leave that mall, leave that bus route, and go somewhere else. And you didn't have a lot of customers to draw from, because in this industry, as you know, Scott, people travel less than 10 or 11 minutes from where they live to where they file. Yours was an exception because you were at the center of all those bus routes, plus specializing in customers that are low income, bottom 80 or 85% of the population. They ride buses. Yep. Those are the people that ride buses. And so you were in that incredible place. And my heart went out to you, and I never told you how sad I was that you were losing this location, and now you had to go find another location. So then you went and found a location. So tell us about that location.
The next location was providentially H&R Block was about 2 miles from the mall, but in a different territory.
Let me interrupt you, Scott, because I think there was another one in between that I went and saw.
Well,
the one,
right.
Okay, the one next to the railroad track.
Yep, there was. I was hoping you wouldn't bring that one up, but there was.
Okay, we can skip over that one, because I just want to tell you, I'll just say this about it. After you opened that location, and I did not pick that location out, someone else helped you pick that location out.
That's right.
So now I was already sad because you got kicked out of the mall. They shut the mall down, closed the mall, and they probably built some fancy complex there. But now I came to see your location, and it was horrible, and I felt so bad. So you went from 1,000 returns down to how many?
I think it was like 400 or something like that.
So that was the second bad break you had, right? I mean, things started so great. Within 18 months, you had 2 bad breaks. They closed the mall, the most wonderful place to be in all of Charlotte. Then we put you by mistake into for the listeners, think of about 6 railroad tracks, and think about there's a building in the middle. I mean, this isn't exactly right, but there's a building in between the railroad tracks, a standalone freestanding building. There's no stores nearby. I mean, I was just mortified. But in any event, then we got a great break. Yep. Right.
Then we got about a mile from there. From that there used to be a shoe shop that we leased it afterwards. Then we found out that H&R Block was leaving their location.
Thank you, H&R Block.
And I think I called you and said, "Hey, John, there's an H&R Block available." And this was like on May the.
You did call.
It was like April the 16th or 17th or something like that. And I said, "Hey, looks like H&R Block's moving out. What do you recommend?" And you said, "You need to call that landlord and take it no matter what." And I did. And we did. And that office is still operating. We don't own it anymore, but it's still operating. And that turned out to be, you're right, that turned out to be a great office. The last year that we operated it, we did 1,800 returns out of that one office.
Yeah, you were making $100,000 out of that office. And so you can see why that as soon as I heard about that, I said, yes. Things have finally turned positive again. It was a great opportunity. So that it's funny how God works, right? And no one gets to skate. We all have our access. I mean, we all have our problems, right? We all have our burdens, and right. It's just a question. No one gets to skate. I've never seen anyone that had the greatest life that everything goes perfect. Everyone gets knocked down. The winners get up and keep going. And you had a couple bad breaks, and then since then it's been mostly pretty wonderful, all pretty wonderful in the tax business. When did you decide? then the next step, how many offices did you grow to?
We at our peak, we had 8 offices. Some of them were kiosks in a check cashing office, but there were 8 in 4 territories. So there were 4 storefronts. In that one year, there were 4 more kiosks.
And then at some point, you decided to talk to us about being area representative, a developer for the market. When did that happen? Remember the year?
That was in 2003, I believe. In that area, it had been a program for about a year, and the idea there was Christy was wanting to stay home with the kids because they were getting a little older and such, and needed her. So she was wanting to back away from the business, and the area developer, area representative model met my skill sets a little better, and I liked that. So that's what we did. And again, you made that possible. I mean, there's no way I could have afforded to buy outright, because those are pretty expensive when you buy a area developer territory. And you helped me out with that too. I did have to come to the table with pretty much everything I had, which was substantial at that point. But you helped me out with a loan there and made that happen. So that was pretty cool. We've done very well with that.
Well, would it be fair to say that since we met on April 30th of 1999, and then you took the leap forward, you've been all in?
Yes, sir.
And that's what I saw. And that's, people think of skin in the game as money. But I've amended that. That's one of my unique philosophies, that it's every single person. If I say, what does skin in the game mean? They say, well, you put money in. And what I learned is that it doesn't matter how much money you put in. If you're a multimillionaire and you put in $50,000, you don't really care. If you have $70,000 to your name and you put in $50,000, that's life-changing, very, very impactful. And so skin in the game means to me that you're all in, that you're emotionally in, not just financially in. And so you've had your skin in the game from the beginning. And that's what I saw. That's why we got involved, and that's why I helped you. So let's talk about the one of the most amazing stories in my whole life, one of the most amazing events that's ever happened to me. You came to me about, how old is Josh now?
He is 22. He'll be 23.
So when you came to me, it was it you 16-ish?
Yep, he was 16, 17, and he acted like that too. He was all hormonal and very teenager-y.
Right. I'm glad you told the story about your Christian values, because I'm one of my unique traits also is that I'm the most incredibly skeptical person in the world. So much so that, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, Scott, so much so that if anyone comes to tell me something, whatever they say, I mean, whether it's my mother, my father, it's a priest, it's a pastor, it's even Jesus, I wonder what will happen when he talks to me and says, because I always wonder why that isn't true. So my first thought when anyone talks to me, no matter what they say, and I don't know if that's just because I'm skeptical or I like to argue or whatever, but you came to me with the most amazing, astonishing story about Josh. And if it was any other human being, I would not have believed it. But you are so Christian. I just love that story. And you came to tell me a story about how my book, but this is the only story out of all the tens of thousands of books that I sold that is like the story of Josh. So tell me what happened with my book and Josh.
So Joshua was a typical 15, 16-year-old. He was playing way too many games. We couldn't get him out of his room and having a tough time communicating with him. And we were even seeing some pretty dark activities going on, some just thought processes and things he was saying. He's a Christian as well, but he was getting away from the Lord and into what I thought was a pretty dark place. So I never liked to give Joshua or my daughter or now my grandson, I don't like to give them anything. I do not want to empower them with entitlement that just because, I have the money to buy something that it's theirs. So I like for them to earn things. And so I told Joshua that I would pay him, I think it was like $50 or something, if he would read iCompete. And he had come to me and said, I want to buy this or that, maybe a game or software or something. And I said, okay, I'll give you $50 if you read iCompete, this book that John Hewitt has just written. And so he agreed, and holy smoke. Now, I'm not saying that changed his whole life, but it was a pivot point in my mind, no doubt. And so we went from not communicating at all to, he would ask, we've got a back porch that looks over some wooded areas in a very nice and peaceful place. He would ask to go sit there, and Christy and he and I would read iCompete, and we would read the stories of liberty in the beginning and all the challenges and all the business principles that you put into the book. And he would read a little bit, and I'd read a little bit. And as we were reading, Christy and I would say, we were there. We saw this happening. And he was just thrilled by that. And he was so excited that a man like you would work with someone like us and make us excellent as well. And I remember that he came to me after his first read, and he liked you because you challenged your teachers in high school. And he did the same thing. He has that same trait where he will challenge them. If they say something that's not true or kind of stupid, he would challenge them. He got in a lot of trouble for that. But I suspect you did too. You wrote that in the very beginning of your book, and he liked that. That's where it hooked him. It went on, and we read through the whole thing, and he just loved it. And then to the point where you invited him up to meet you, and we drove up to Virginia Beach, and you met with him, and he still talks about that. And now, I'll tell you, John, he's here on leave right now. He decided to go into the Army 2.5 years ago, and wow, what a change that has made in him. And he's a man now. He's a grown man, and we talk like adults now. That's that story. It's a beautiful story.
Let me add one more point to it as I remember it and see if I remember it correctly. And by the way, when he came up to see me, he had notes. He had made a list of questions. So and there were some about the book, but some just about my life. But the way that I remember it, Scott, is you guys were seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist at the time, because this is the way I remember the story. So tell me if I have it right or wrong, but you came to me and said, Josh read the book and came to you and said, I'm cured. I don't need to see the psychiatrist or the psychologist anymore. And you said, yeah, right. Just like I thought, yeah, right, yeah, sure, right. He said, I'm cured. Yes. I'm cured, Dad. And so you went to the psychiatrist or psychologist and sat down for a few minutes together. And then the therapist said, well, Scott, you can leave the room. And then he just talked to Josh for some period of time, whatever it was, 15, 20, 30 minutes. He came out and said, Josh is cured.
Well, he didn't use those words, but you're exactly right. He said, Scott, Mr. Curtis, I don't think that we need to continue these meetings anymore. And I said, really? And he said, yeah, he's changed. And he's got a better perspective now. So, yeah, you're exactly right. I had forgotten that part of it, but you're absolutely right.
So I caught you on a couple things, right? I caught you by the railroad track thing and the therapist thing.
Well, I like to forget about the railroad track thing.
That was horrible. That was a horrible building, too. So what's your future? What are you going to I think you're going to be selling out of your tax area representative. And what's your future? What are you looking to do in the future?
Eventually, I'm still an area developer with Liberty, and that's going. But I see the end of that. I think that area developer model is not going to continue much longer there, and it's just a different company now. And I'm not saying good or bad, but it's just a different company. And I wanted to say this too to the listeners. I have been in 4, 5, 6 businesses myself. I've owned and sold or walked away from several businesses. Some have been epic failures. Some have just been kind of failures. And some have been very successful. And John, I've never told you this, but the ones that I've done with you are the successful ones. I kind of sat down one day and said, well, what does that mean after Liberty? And I need to find out what John Hewitt's involved in and do that myself. So a few years ago, we purchased a first choice business broker franchise, and it's been a long runway to get it off the ground, mostly because of us and me being divided by working as an area developer. But it's finally coming to fruition. I've got a couple businesses that are getting ready to close and will be positive cash flowing that. But that's what my future is, John. And, as far as retirement, I'm in most people's minds, I'm at retirement age. You're way over retirement age. But I'll tell you,
I'm only 10 years older than you.
I know it, but that's way over retirement age. And I know you're big brother age to me. And, but I mean, you're getting what I'm doing because I'm 66 and I get people saying all the time, well, gosh, aren't you going to retire? And I'm like, well, heck no, why would I do that? That would be the most boring thing in the world. So I don't see myself retiring until I'm 80 or 83 or 85 or something like that. So I see a long future with First Choice, and I love doing it. I really enjoy the skill set that brings forward and people that I meet and all that. And the franchise itself is very well designed.
Well, thank you. I didn't realize you were that old. I'm only 5 years older than you. But
I know it. I knew you were too. I'm 66. Yeah.
Right.
You're 70.
Yeah, and the way I say it, Scott, is they got to kill me to stop me. But, the one reason that I'll give you this one reason that you haven't been as successful at First Choice as you were at Liberty is you haven't involved me enough. You need to, you're a 5-hour drive away. If you're not seeing me every 3 months, you got to see me every 6 months. You can't, you're not going to be all that you can be without us working together. So let's spend more time together.
Very good. I will take you up on that because that was the reason why I was successful at Liberty. You're exactly right.
Exactly right. I told you stories how I was in your mall. I was in your railroad station office, right? We need to work together. And thank you for being a guest today. We're out of time. And hopefully bring the family, including especially Josh and the grandson.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I want Thomas to grow up in this atmosphere as well.
Exactly. Cool. I can be meaningful. Thank you. Have a wonderful day and appreciate your being on the show.
Well, it's my honor and privilege. Thank you, John.
Thank you for taking the time to learn about how to build your empire with John Hewitt. Find John on LinkedIn at John T. Hewitt or message John Hewitt on Facebook. This is iCompete, live from the castle, building your empire with John Hewitt. Don't miss new episodes every Monday by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, cpnshows.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, this was iCompete, building your empire with John Hewitt.
You dream of a career with better pay, benefits, and hours, but you're not sure about going back to school full-time. At Miller Mott College, we can help. We offer programs that are affordable and flexible to fit into your busy life. Most can be completed in less than 2 years. See what Miller Mott College can offer. Visit our campus at 6397 Lee Highway, Suite 100 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or learn more online at miller-motte.edu.
The journey to earning your degree as an adult can seem daunting. It's a path paved with uncertainty, but every great accomplishment starts with a single step. At Bethel University, we know this path well, so take that first step and let Bethel University be the catalyst that propels you toward a brighter future. Bethel University, where we belong and become.